Welcome back. I'm Felix, and I am reacting to 6 ignored 70s and 80s cartoons. Forgotten Saturday morning 70s and 80s cartoons you never thought about. Wow, that's a long title. I've never watched his channel. It's called the Gen Experience, like Gen X. I'm looking at his toys. I knew some people who had some of these toys. I had, did I have any of these? I had a couple of He-Man figures. I had some Transformers. Was there some GoBots up there too? I had a GoBot. I had Scooter. But yeah, he has a lot. I don't have any of my toys anymore. Most of my toys, well, I think I got a few, but I played with my toys, and so they're all broken up. But I didn't think to collect them. No, back then you just played with your toys. It wasn't until the Gen Xers got older that, oh, we should have collected them. Because that's like also like with comic books. The reason comic books became so valuable is because the boomer when they were growing up, their parents threw them away. That's why they became so valuable. And that's why the market for them also collapsed, because it's not like that anymore. Because people realized they were valuable and they stopped throwing them away. All right, but let's take a look at it, see if I recognize any of these cartoons. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get into it.
You said, I listened. Thank you so much to everybody who answered the survey. After a really successful show last week about often overlooked toy lines that we adore, I thought we'd do something in the same vein, but completely different. How about we take a look at those often overlooked and ignored Saturday morning cartoons? You know, the ones that we have no recollection of, the ones we yearn to see again, or even those we wish we'd never remember. You tell me which were the good, the bad, or the ugly. I'm Victor, and straight out of the Gen Experience, the overlooked, the ignored, and often forgotten Saturday morning cartoons that just might still ring a bell. Speaking of ringing a bell, how about clicking subscribe and the alert icon after pressing like to help me out? Now, on with the show. How many will you remember? Fan of the Waltons or Little House while growing up? Did you ever think to yourself, this would be awesome as a cartoon? Or how much better could this be if it were animation? Well, Hanna-Barbera and ABC did just that, and for one season, a turn of the 20th century family went through daily life on Saturday mornings. Hong Kong Phooey and the New Adventures of Gilligan's Island must have just been too edgy. When I think of Saturday morning cartoons, this is not something that resonates to me, but perhaps some of you remember the day-to-day excitement of the days, the family from the title. Saturday morning rituals were just forming at this time, and there was a lot of trial and error. These Are the Days came out in 1974, and along with shows like Korg, 70,000 BC, and Devlin, inspired by Evel Knievel, our trusted cartoon
I do remember watching Devlin. I do remember Devlin.
companion Hanna-Barbera tried
Clearly I was watching a rerun if it came out around the same time.
something new to kids' fare, the serious cartoon. All of them were ratings bombs, with notable voice actors such as June Lockhart from Lost in Space and everyone's favorite girl next door child actress, Pamela Ferdin. It was canceled after only one season, like the others. Luckily for the Day family from the town of Emsville, they continued in reruns for a number of years to come before vanishing from the tube and our memory banks. The same year as These Are the Days, the Hanna-Barbera studio released Valley
That looked horrible even for the time.
of the Dinosaurs on CBS. If you think that a family sucked into a vortex to prehistoric times to live amongst their Neanderthal ancestors sounded an awful lot like Land of the Lost, you'd be right. And Hanna-Barbera didn't care. This was no coinkydink. That was the intent. Going as far as having the iconic live-action adventure show and this cartoon counterpart first broadcast on the very same day. Now, I will give you that Land of the Lost isn't exactly prehistoric Earth, but some alternate reality or dimension. But surprise, Valley of the Dinosaurs is also not exactly prehistoric Earth. Besides living side by side with the giant reptiles, these cave dwellers spoke damn good English.
But she growls at him.
The show included Shannon Farnham, the voice of Super Friends Wonder Woman, as well as Alan Skeletor Oppenheimer, and usual voiceover suspect Don Messick. Land of the Lost and Valley of the Dinosaurs might sound similar, but they had their differences too. where Land of the Lost had the cast running away from Grumpy or avoiding the most terrifying Saturday morning nightmares, the Sleestacks, Valley of the Dinosaurs had the Butler family helping the caveman with everyday things like the wheel, using levers, and flying a plane.
They have seen us!
Well, one stop too many, Locke.
Give me Sleestacks any day. No wonder Land of the Lost lasted 3 seasons and the dinos went extinct. You know I couldn't resist that. More than a decade later, Gen Xers, with Millennial Rising, were treated to Galtar and the Golden Lance, a fairly typical sword and sorcery story with an occasional damsel in distress. Actually, everyone was in distress. At first, I thought it was a video game turned animation, like Dragon's Lair, but
I remember Dragon's Lair becoming a cartoon. It was a video game with actual animation in it. It was pretty ahead of its time, the video game. But Galtar, I've heard of it, but I don't recall ever watching it.
Galtar was at the tail end of the very popular fantasy movie trend and was riding the coattails of Masters of the Universe. With unmistakable Hanna-Barbera style, along with a touch of Don Bluth, Galtar gave 21 episodes in one season, more than the typical 13 or 16. Way to go, Galtar. Always magical swords with us, it is. But we couldn't get enough, and this one raised the stakes by going full Darth Maul with its double blade that appeared from the single hilt when held over Galtar's head. The magical lance could then be pulled apart to be wielded as 2 separate swords. We were treated to surprisingly dark themes to kick off the series. The villain, Tormak, who wishes for the enchanted blade to be united with the sacred shield, which both belong to Zorn and his sister Princess Goleta. Goleta? Huh? Well, he's also responsible for killing the remainder of the royal family, as well as Galtar's parents. Yikes. Tormak was performed by the amazing Brock Peters, famed for his portrayal of Tom Robinson, the accused in the classic To Kill a Mockingbird. Sadly, as was the way with most American animation, Galtar ended before any resolution was revealed between he and Tormak. However, Galtar was seen briefly in an episode of Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law in 2004. Good to see him working again. If you've watched some of my past shows, you might know I love the Universal Monsters, and I'm even good with a little parody here and there. Give me Monsters cereal any day. But as for this 1970 Filmation cartoon, it was not a favorite of mine, and I only learned about it when it popped up one year while looking for a rendition of the Halloween staple, the Monster Mash. Groovy Ghoulies was actually a 1-season cartoon, but as everyone knows, cartoons might only have been made with 1 season worth of shows, but they also would play for years and years on end, repeating the same 16 episodes ad nauseum.
So Galtar is the only one I've heard of, but I've never watched it. So.
Horrible Hall was filled with our favorites. Well, at least some version of them that, like the title says, were groovy. There was Drac, Frankie, Wolfie, and a host of other notable and sordid hip monster types. Like so many hits of the era, Archie and Josie, the main characters were in a band and the cartoon would include an inserted musical break, if not 2. Which is probably why they also had a crossover with Sabrina and other Filmation series, and how it became the highest rated kid show during its initial release. Not to mention, got itself a vinyl LP of original songs to bring the crazy home. Hanna-Barbera was like an old friend. More than any other studios, the Hanna-Barbera logo was comforting and familiar. They ruled the 1970s cartoon world with a design aesthetic you couldn't mistake. But Filmation was also prominent in Western animation, and as was the norm for Filmation, there was about 3 actors total providing all the vocal talent for the show. One of the original names of the show was Monster Inn, partly because of the setting of the show, and partly because of the play on the title of another comedy show, Laugh In, which this cartoon was inspired by.
I used to watch Laugh In reruns on Nick at Night.
The show played out like a sketch comedy show instead of a sitcom.
Yeah,
5 different bits were performed throughout the 30-minute show, and that made it easier to break apart and repackage into anthology cartoon series, which they did throughout the entire decade of the 70s. Keen-eyed viewers may also notice concepts from this show made it into another Filmation classic, The Ghostbusters. No, not those guys. These guys. The Skelevator, the Wolf Wagon, the Skelephone, and Drac himself were recycled or repurposed for that 80s romp. We're going long in
They used to do that a lot back then. They would just reuse animation and draw over top of it.
those final Gen Xers experiences with this one. In 1988, some teens find a petrified egg in the La Brea tar pits. After dislodging it and rescuing it, it hatches. Well, in this world, it worked. He became their pal, and they named him Denver, named for Denver, Colorado, which is odd since the show takes place in LA. What started as a 1 hour long special called Blast from the Past became a cartoon where a skateboard riding, potato chip eating dinosaur and his new friends worked to keep him secret and safe from a concert promoter who wants to exploit Denver on stage for money, as one does in the 1980s. Luckily, with a little piece of his eggshell, Denver can whisk everyone away through time travel to his prehistoric home to escape any dangerous shenanigans, like being sold to a scientist for experimentation, as one did in the 1980s.
Whoa, this is heavy.
Denver dealt with greed, conservation, pollution, and ironically, extinction, all before Captain Planet arrived on the scene. But the two did share a voice actress. Kath Soucie, I think that's her name, was both Heather in Denver and the Planeteer Linka. Surprisingly, it had 2 seasons and 50 episodes, plus received a recommendation from the nation's Education Association. It was vaguely familiar, but I had reached a certain age where if you watched cartoons, you did it on the sly. You wouldn't want that to get out. But how many of you late Gen Xers or old millennials remember this cartoon series? Another
I remember it, but it wasn't like something I went out of my way to watch.
season wonder, but many of them were, was Around the World in 80 Days. Loosely based on the Jules Verne novel, it's also novel.
Well, no, I think there's been more than one cartoon based on this. Because right now, it doesn't look familiar, but the name is familiar.
For being the first Australian-produced cartoon aired in the United States. It was not something I remember catching, like ever, even in repeats. But some of our earliest Xers might remember this one from Saturday mornings. Although most cartoons had a formula, 80s Days actually had it down to a pattern that was simply the same setup each and every episode. And they weren't apologizing. Phileas Fogg describes their next port in the adventure. He teaches viewers a proverb. The villain, Mr. Fix, describes his plan to stop Phileas. The heroes continue while trying to be stopped by Fix. The audience gets a factual history lesson about the location in the story. The proverb comes in handy during the episode to help them out of a jam and find success. And it all ends with Phileas saying, "Good show," to his valet, Passepartout. I know I've butchered his friend's name, but I can barely spell it. There is one thing that fascinates me about this series though. Most American cartoons, not to mention many of our favorite live-action shows, just end with no warning. Not to mention many of our favorite
Did they really
hanger because they were not picked up or not renewed. With not to mention many of
They did.
favorite live-action shows just end with no warning. Just a frustrating cliffhanger because they were not picked up or not renewed, and the audience gets robbed of a proper finale. With this cartoon, Australia knew that by the end of the season, they had to wind up the story, just in case. And so Around the World had an actual ending, like it was planned from the beginning. If Phileas was able to achieve the flight in the agreed 80 days, he would win the hand of Belinda Mays, not to mention a sizable side bet of 20,000 pounds from Lord Mays. So, that's how it ended. And with that, I have to give some accolades, even if this may not have been up my alley. Was it up yours? Right there in the mid-80s, new toys were supported by animated series.
This is the way.
Yeah.
This is the way. This is the way.
Even the game Tag, with a digital twist,
Laser
got
Tag.
itself a TV show. You say laser tag and there isn't any...
I do remember this one. I do remember watching this one. But if I remember correctly, it didn't come on the same time all the time. And this one was a weird one because it was like she was their daughter or something like that, or granddaughter from the future.
United States who's confused. Perhaps because you played it in an actual brick and mortar laser tag arena at the mall, or because you were one of the first to own this high-tech version of the game tag.
I had a friend who had that. We used to play it.
Wonder. Yeah, Worlds of Wonder, the company that made that talking bear.
Hi, my name is Teddy Ruxpin.
I remember that.
Touching
thing.
or tagging your opponent was no longer the goal, but long-range shooting from an infrared laser to a target worn by another player that would vibrate and blink when hit leveled up this classic outdoor activity. The popularity makes it no surprise there was a cartoon series. As for the story, it was pretty convoluted. Tell me what you think. Jamie travels back in time to 87 to help her 80s teenage ancestors. She's protecting them from Draxon, a criminal from 2061. Draxon has been revived from suspended animation by Jamie's teacher following his spaceship's hijacking and crash in the Atlantic Ocean. Draxon goes back in time to destroy Jamie so she won't create the Starlight gun and Star Sensor. Okay, basically that's just the real laser tag merchandise that you're being convinced to buy when watching the cartoon. These things you wear allow a person to manipulate the blah blah and even blah 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 travel through time. Jamie's battles in the present day are completely unnoticed by her relatives' parents, who think she's just a foreign exchange student and a weird one. And Draxon ends up being one of Jamie's relatives in the end. Whew, drama. Just your regular 80s cartoon fare. And let's not even bring up the Skugs. Best to just move on. This
Yeah, I
was a
vaguely
Ruby Spears
remember it.
creation, and sadly their one season was limited to the minimal 13 episodes. But it did include the voice talents of Tress MacNeille, Futurama fame, and the legendary Don LaFontaine.
In a world where both of our cars were totally underwater.
Can you believe it? He didn't just do movie trailers. In an ironic twist of fate, the toy competitor of laser tag, Photon, also got the accompanying TV show treatment, albeit in live action, and total crap.
Oh.
A dick move? Only if you mean Dick Animation, the studio that produced Photon. By 1988, laser tag had all but vanished from toy shelves, and Worlds of Wonder was bankrupt. Sadly, this could have been due to an unfortunate incident involving a 19-year-old playing the game with his friends in 1987. In a dark park where cops were called, the toy was mistaken for the real thing, and fatal shots were delivered. Look it up to learn more. Now, to turn your sad face upside down, let's get to the moment we've all been waiting for, and something that I truly remembered, but not sure why I remembered such a seemingly unmemorable entry. In 1981, Ruby Spears released this little nugget, this little gold nugget, Goldie Gold and Action Jack, along with her Cocker Spaniel
I've heard of this, but I never saw it.
called Nugget. The heiress and her reporter boyfriend, platonic partner Jack, went on random adventures, like Indiana Jones meets Richie Rich. When she wasn't flying her helicopter in her mansion, she could afford things that didn't exist, like hover bikes, plated in gold, of course. But apparently she couldn't afford to have an alternate outfit, and fur does not go with every occasion. Hell, if you're going to be that filthy rich, at least Goldie did more with her time than become a brand or star in a reality show. Nothing like a modern heiress, Goldie Gold was much more of a go-getter, daring. One subscriber of mine likened the show as an animated version of Honey West from 1965 with Anne Francis. I mean, if you replace Nugget with an ocelot named Bruce, I could buy that theory. I'm being honest when I say I remembered the show, but not its title. Well, not until years later when I ran across it on YouTube, watched it and thought, I know this thing. And I remember liking it then, but had never thought twice about it
Never
after
saw
the
it.
early 80s broadcast. The voice talent is a little who's who. Goldie was played by Dinah Girl herself, Judy Sturgis, and Jack was played by radio personality Sonny Melendrez,
Hello, hello. I'm Sonny Melendrez, and welcome to You and Me, Kid.
who
gonna have
you and
so
I
much
might
fun.
remember from You and Me, Kid, the morning family show during the premiere year of the infant Disney Channel. Rounding out the cast of three was Booker Bradshaw, actor and Motown executive, who also was in Laser Tag. Like so many, Goldie Gold and Action Jack was one season, and even the minimum episodes of 13. But it had the action, and no matter the storyline, if there was daring adventure and high thrills, I was in. Which of these were you all in for? There were some real goodies when we were
It is
kids.
some.
Please do me a favor, click that like and even subscribe to this AI-free channel and check out other great shows from the generation that
AI-free
brought us the
channel.
imagination we still can't let go of. The Gen Experience.
Yeah, those were some. Yeah, laser tag and the dinosaur, and I've heard of this. Like I've heard of some of them, but I never watched them. The dinosaur one, Denver, and laser tag, I do remember watching. But as for the rest, man, don't recall any of those, or I knew the name, but don't recall ever watching them. I'll leave a link for him. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and everyone take care. Later.